I say the word Tevis, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Self-discovery. That's
Very
what
good.
I would say is finding out what you can do.
This is the gold standard. This is the gold medal of endurance riding, and we have to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the ride and that we keep it as the gold standard.
I have a story for you, and it's about how I first learned about endurance, what it really meant. I went off to a school called the Pacific Coast Equestrian Research Farm, run by Wentworth and Linda Tellington, and as all they could talk about was the Tevis Cup ride. Riding your horse 100 miles in one day. Well, I mean, I was already primed from a 5-year-old think, oh, that's what you do. You know, that's what you do. And at that school, they taught us jumping and dressage and, you know, showing and combined training. And we went to all sorts of events. And in the spring, I was there for a year. In the spring, it was the season for endurance riding. And I started training for endurance riding. I had a great mentor, the Tellingtons, who were all about teaching you how to do things, how to get things done, how to make things happen. And I rode my first endurance ride, and I have a wonderful photo of that of Dr. Barcelow on Good Trip, and me riding this little buckskin Mustang horse. And it's my favorite picture because we're both perfectly balanced, riding through the woods, and it's a Charlie Barrio picture.
Wow. You talked about, you know, Linda Tellington Jones, Wentworth Tellington, Dr. Barcelow, Charlie Barrio. I mean, one of the reasons why I love having conversations with you, Shannon, is because, you know, the stories you have about some of the pioneers in our sport as endurance. You got a chance. You had that chance as a young lady to meet these people, and they were your mentors, and you probably idolized them because they were incredible individuals.
Yeah.
I'd like to maybe start just by talking about Wentworth, because he was an amazing horseman himself.
He was a, you know, he, oh gosh, where do you start with him? He was a teacher at West Point.
Yeah.
At the time where they had the last graduating class with the U.S. Cavalry methodology of horsemanship. So he was just an excellent horseman, and he had lots of opportunities to hone his skill. And then when he met Linda, Linda Hood up in Canada, he just immediately was smitten by her and asked her to work with him with all these horses. And so they did, but they ultimately got married, and they moved to Southern California, where he was a teacher at the Chadwick School. And she taught riding lessons. Well, at the time, he wanted to make a name for Linda in California, and how would they do that? Long distance riding. What attracted them? What got them excited? The Tevis Cup ride, Wendell Roby. What did he do best? He was a writer.
Yeah.
Everything they did, they wrote about it, and they wrote. They had a column in a Western Horseman magazine called Let's Go, and they wrote about this. And I call it taking a swirl up the spiral. You know, they just kept growing their gig, you know, and they found Bink Galita, the great endurance mare, Bink Galita, and off to the Tevis Cup they went, and she topped 10 in her first year. That was 1961, and 4 weeks later, they went to Oklahoma, where Linda rode Jim Shoulders 100-mile
Shoulders, right.
ride in Moore, Oklahoma, and she won by 5.5 hours on the same mare, Binkalita. That was the first time in modern history that one horse did 200-mile rides in the same year, let alone, back to back like that. So that was, that was pretty snappy. So they just, started growing. And they grew their school, the Pacific Coast Equestrian Research Farm. Yeah. And then I landed at that school in 1967, and I lived there for a year.
You were saying that they were doing a lot of clinics and trying to encourage good horsemanship with the long distance riding, with endurance.
Yes.
And that people would come from all over the place,
right,
to learn more about distance riding from Wint and Linda.
I mean, anybody who understands endurance riding, once they fall for it, they would travel to the miles to go to a ride.
I've told people for years that Tevis was like a drug, and that it's one of those events that once you do it, you either are totally hooked or you'll never touch it again. And it's the kind of thing that it has so much magic to it and so much energy on its own. It's almost like it's like a live organism, from the time it begins and the time it ends, from late Thursday night till late Sunday evening. There's just this time warp that exists, and it's called the Tevis.
So that included, they started doing these symposiums at the research farm in Badger, California. It was a 365-acre ranch that they had there. And so they would do endurance symposiums. This is way before AERC got started. So who would come to those? Phil Gardner, Pat Fitzgerald, Cliff Lewis, Ed Johnson, and with Bezetol, and all sorts of people. Ro Bailey was there. There's a lot of people that got their roots nourished at the research farm.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me about your first Tevis experience as a rider.
So my first Tevis was in 1969. And I had been invited to, the previous year to ride the first Virginia City 100-mile ride. Cliff Lewis offered me a horse, and I rode that. And then we did well there. And so then 69 was my first Tevis, and I rode a horse named Big Red, a slaughter pen thoroughbred horse. I had no clue what I was getting into. Didn't have a clue. And I didn't know what to drink or eat or anything.
For yourself?
For myself,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you had good mentorship from Linda and Wint as far as getting to the ride. But...
Yeah, but, I was kind of out on my own by then.
Okay.
Cliff had different ideas about doing things, and I was riding with him on the Tevis. And anyway, I don't recommend just drinking coffee all day.
No.
But anyway, I did not finish that year. I got as far as Todd Valley. Oh,
you were close.
Cold.
That's a tough pull.
But it was, it didn't work. 1969, failure, flunked out. But I learned a lot. And what really motivated me the most is what not to do.
Yeah.
And I think, Phil Gardner always said this too. He said that when you don't finish, you learn probably more than when you do finish. So that went in the learned more category. I thought, I want to, I thought, what do you want? I want a Tevis buckle.
Yeah.
That was
It was burning on you.
It was, unfinished business. So I joined AERC, which was, happening. I saw an ad in a magazine for it or something. So with that, you got a subscription to Saddle Action magazine.
Right.
So I'm reading through it and going, oh, this is great. And then I see this little ad in there and it says, wanted, crew member for Great American Horse Race. All expenses paid and 10% of the purse. I go, that's me. I write
And
this.
10% of the purse.
And 10% of the
wow.
purse. I write this big flamboyant letter and ship it off. Well, it was Phil Gardner's ad.
Okay.
And so he picked me as his crew member. So I moved spring of 76, 1976. I moved up to Auburn, and then we got everything all ready, and we took two Lanigan Arabians off on this marvelous event, the Great American Horse Race. And I crewed for Phil that summer, and it was a marvelous adventure. I have most of a book written about that, but it's still coming. So when we got home that summer, and by the way, Lori Stewart won that. We split off and took the Pony Express Trail home with Dave Nicholson, and that's what started the whole 5-day, multi-day.
It was the birthplace of it.
Yeah, it was that. I mean, I could spend all night right on that, but I'll move right along. So we got back, and then that following year, I just trained for the Tevis. I said, damn it, I'm going to get that buckle. So I went through all the gyrations, and by that time it was Phil Gardner, Shannon, and Rick and Lori Stewart, and the four of us rode all the time, and Phil was our mentor. And so I got my first Tevis buckle in 1977. So what happened in 1977? There were about 13, 14 runners.
Oh, yeah.
With the Tevis, because Gordy, as Chuck mentioned earlier, Gordy ran in 74.
Cowman in 76.
Cowman in 76. 77, there's 14 runners. And so I am so well trained. I go, I got this in the bag. I know what to do. So I'm riding the ride, and hey, aren't those little runners? Hey, look at that. There's another one. Hey, So going into Michigan Bluff, I felt like $1 million. And I knew I had it in the bag because our training regime amounted to, in the last weeks going into Tevis, amounted to the four of us, Rick, Lori, Shannon, and Phil, rode from Michigan Bluff to Auburn. And then on Monday, Rick Stewart and I rode from Michigan Bluff to Auburn on our backup horses. So I knew I had this. So I'm just enjoying the ride at this point. And I'm going down through Volcano Canyon, and there's Andy Gonzalez.
Yep.
This dark stranger, and he's running along, and we're kind of going like this, and I'm going through Volcano Canyon, and I said, this run is going to be a hit, and I'm going to make sure it is. My exact words. So I was thoroughly entertained, learned so much watching this guy running the last 40 miles. He finished, he got to Robie Point 15 minutes after I did.
Wow.
And I was knocked out by that. Completely knocked out. I went, yay, I have a Tevis buckle, but wow, look what we have on our hands here,
Right.
And so I got to know Andy, and I immediately just went, yeah. And so now the ride was over. I had my buckle, and now it was time for me to get a job. So fortunately, Phil Gardner was very good friends with Drew Barner and Wendell Roby. So Phil just said, go ask Drew for a job at the Hart Federal Savings. I said, okay, I went there. So I started working at the Hart Federal Savings, which was Mecca for the endurance riding sport. It was the home of the Western States Trail Foundation. It was, Wendell Roby. It was Drew Barner. It was Kathy Perry worked there. Hal Hall worked there. I mean, it was just endless. We were all endurance riders. The break room was just constantly filled with training your horses. How you do this? How do you do on the ride? What ride are you going to? The whole thing. So it just took off. Well, then the phone started ringing, and people were calling to see about this run.
Yeah.
Well, nobody else cared about it except me. So I fielded all those calls.
Wow.
And so, I got to talk to people that were calling from Iowa saying things like, well, my wife is mad at me. My kids don't know who I am anymore. And my friends all think I'm nuts. I'm running 80 or 90 miles a week. He says, what's going on? I said, it sounds like you're doing everything just right. I was the only voice of encouragement in their lives, And so, here Wendell Roby was saying, well, kids, here's what I have for you. I have this marvelous trail.
Right.
And there's the Sierra, which he loved, and the world is your oyster. Go out there. And so we would go out all the time. This was in the 70s.
There was something about that number, 100, that really infatuated not just riders, but then runners.
Right.
Where all of a sudden went 100 miles.
Yeah,
It just seemed like so far, but it was possible.
Right.
And that was Wendell that said, this is possible.
And Gordy, said,
and then Gordy said, I can run it.
And people were in awe of this. And Kurt Sproul, who was one of our original directors, he says, we need to take out a full-page ad in Runner's World magazine. And I said, no, let's not. We were all endurance riders that started the 100-mile run. So I said, let's hone our skill here. Let's get good at what we're doing and let it grow from the inside out. I was adamant about that.
Well, it was a good thing that he listened to you, because I think that's the only way that run could have evolved.
And so we let it grow organically, and all of our aid station people were endurance riders. That whole event started.
When did it split off?
It split off in 1978. We had after 77, we knew it was going to go
there was 14
somewhere.
Runners in 77, so it's like, okay, it might double the next year, and it was interfering with the
Right, we knew
ride
it was going to go.
At that point.
And so in the fall of 78, we had our first board meeting. We selected a bunch of people that Wendell wanted to have on the board. And I went, and I was like, I knew I had a place on that board, and Wendell didn't really know me that well at the time. And so when he read the first list, my name wasn't on that.
Yeah.
And Kurt and Mo Sproul, Mo Livermore now, and they said, Shannon needs to be on that board. She needs a seat on this board. And so he said, okay. And I think he was glad I did, But anyway, we then set a new date a month ahead of the horse ride. And then it just started growing.
It grew.
Yeah.
Something that's really fun to talk to people that were on the ground floor of, whether it was the ride and talking to you at the run, is just the enthusiasm, and what it must have felt like to feel that in the very beginnings of the run and being part of that. It must have been an amazing time for you.
I think Wendell said it best when after Monday morning after an event, I came in and I was beaming, exhausted, but beaming. We had 64 runners out there, and
wow.
And everything went okay, and nobody got hurt. And he came in, and I'm sort of going through all this stuff, and he just said to me, "Honey, we've got a bear by the tail."
So he was excited about it.
He
too.
loved it.
He loved the run.
He loved it. He was so glad. And he also loved, he was, in his late 70s at the time. And he loved the idea that these young sprouts were coming in and going, Yahoo! We're going to make this happen. And I remember Mo and I were, we wanted everything to be so perfect. We always felt like excellence is in the details. So we would write our first brochure, which was like 4 pages, you know, and we crafted everything, and we did in pictures right here and everything, and we took the mock-up into Drew Barner, you know, because her opinion mattered so much to us, and we wanted to make sure it met her standard of excellence. So we took it into her, and she just looked at it and says, "Oh yeah, that's fine. Go on, off you go. You know, take off." I mean, she trusted us.
Yeah.
So we were able to have the support of Wendell and Drew, and I don't know if you really know what that felt like, but it was magnificent.
Yeah.
You know, it was magnificent for him to say, you know, go enjoy this trail that I've created, you know, that I've pruned back the bushes for you and marked it, and you know, which he did in the early 30s,
and established it, which took, you know, it took somebody like Wendell to be able to do that.
And it all came from his passion of
Yes.
the pioneers.
So there was a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm going on.
Yeah.
And you know, it had been interesting to be in a room with Wendell and Drew, watching this evolve, you know, because it was all about the horse, and you know, and then it evolved into something else, and Wendell may not have ever even thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have to, you know, we have to talk about Wendell when you're talking about the Tevis Cup, the Western States 100-mile ride, and the run. I mean, we have to talk about Wendell.
Yeah. I mean, he was a visionary. I mean, you think about it too. He was a visionary. He was the first man in California. The first Hart Federal was the first company in California to have solar panels on the rooftop of a commercial building.
Wow.
Because he saw that future, you know.
Yeah.
And so it operated the heating and air conditioning system in the building, which didn't always work, but you know, I mean, this was back in '76.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but he had the vision for that. He had a lot of vision, and being around people like Went Tellington, Wendell Roby, Dr. Barstow, these men that were my, you know, these role models for me were so strong, you know, and you know, I'm the kind of person who likes to observe what's going on and see where the weak link is and go in and fix it and strengthen whatever we have, you know. And I'm not the kind of person that you know, just does kind of everyday things.
Well,
I always like to be doing something significant.
And sometimes that might upset the water a little bit too.
It does, yeah, it does.
Well, it's good that we have you, especially in those early days, to keep things on, you know, to help keep things on track. Yeah. So tell me about, you know, you wrote it in '77, the Tevis in '77. Did you write it again?
Yes, I wrote it in '79.
Okay.
On a marvelous horse named Heckin' Lively. And she came from Nebraska, the same breeders that...
from Rush Creek? Or?
No, they had Rush Creek mares.
Okay.
And they provided the horses for Lori Stewart that she rode on the Pony Express ride. And so, and then they just kept sending horses to Lori. And so Retro Rocket and Risky Rocket, which she ran the Tevis on, were from the Fells, Gloria and Jean Fells. And they bred this Heckin' Lively horse that ultimately I rode a few times on rides and the Tevis, greatest ride on the Tevis I had. And then she ultimately was sold to Sandy Schuler.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I rode again in '81. I rode it 4 times. I finished twice. I rode it in '81 on I was actually, people don't realize this, but I was the ride director in '80 and '81. After Drew died in '79. Okay. I pretty much was doing
You took over the activities as a director.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I was the ride, making it all happen. Didn't really have that title at that time. But I went up to Squaw Valley or Pat Browning, remember Pat Browning?
I knew Pat.
Well, he said, Shannon, you don't have a horse? You should ride. I said, oh, I don't need a horse. So he brought a horse for me. Oh. And so I, probably the first time this ever happened, I rode a blind date.
Yeah.
He brought in a grade stallion named Red.
A grade stallion.
A grade stallion. And the first time I ever got on that horse, I put my foot in the stirrup, got on him, and we started the Tevis.
That's incredible.
I'm game, okay.
Uh-huh.
And I rode with Jerry Myers because Marilyn Hunter said,
right.
If she's going to go ride, Jerry, you drive this Friday afternoon at Squaw Valley. You drive down to my place and get that Radar horse out of the pasture, come up and ride with Shannon. And so he did. We rode to Robinson Flat and had a marvelous day.
Uh-huh.
But that was it. But
that was it. For both you and Jerry, or
yeah, we quit there. Yeah. But that was when Roby's last ride out on the trail.
Yeah.
So we, were sort of herding him in as he was bailing off the,
Yeah. Yeah. So. I heard the story that, and I know there's probably lots of stories, different stories about that, but he snuck up there, not telling his wife, and he just entered the ride, and nobody could tell him not to. Yeah. And he was just determined to get one last ride in.
He had.
I might do that myself one day.
Yeah, he had several guys from that worked for him at Hart Federal. They're helping him crew for him, and they were. You gotta admire his grit.
Oh,
I mean, this all goes back to that endurance thing that I saw when I was 5 years old. And, this tenacious attitude of you can do this, and so he fell off the horse, and they had to put him. It was not that pretty, but. So they got him into Roby Point, and the guys had him over here, and the horse was over there, and they said, Wendell, your horse is lame, he can't go on. Uh-huh. And so
that was it.
Yeah.
Well, Shannon, I look at you as a very important person because you're a keeper of our history, and you have such great stories, and you had such great experiences, and you somehow or another, however it worked out, we're able to be with the right people at the right times.
I was fortunate,
to get to know, the pioneers of our sport.
Yeah.
And now you're an author, and you're writing books to save our history and to preserve it in print. And so your first book was Strike a Long Trot, and that's a book about Linda Tellington Jones.
With a lot of Tevis history.
Oh, well, it has to have that.
Yeah.
And about Wint, which is always very fun to read about.
Yeah.
And now you said you're working on something.
Endurance Riders of the Pony Express Trail.
Okay.
Yeah. So working on that one. But I have been very fortunate, and I have to deliver a few words, 4 words that my mother, it was my mother's anthem.
Okay.
And that is never miss an opportunity.
Well, you've done well with that because you've had a chance to know these people and not just know them, but have personal experiences with them.
I'm pleased about that.
I think it's really important that you get this written down and share this history, because there's very few people anymore that I know that knew Wendell like you knew him. They're disappearing.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. I feel like I was in a real golden age of, endurance riding and everything.
So where do you want to see the run? It has its own thing now. It's going in its own direction, but the ride itself,
the run has taken off.
It's taken off, and it's going in all different. I mean, it's a world class event. Yeah.
And there were over 4,200 entries in the lottery
Yeah.
to take like 260 entries last year.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It is huge. Looking at just endurance as a sport, AERC, their mottos to finish is to win. And I know because you were married to Phil, and this was his baby, was AERC. I mean, that slogan or motto, I grew up I mean, that was embedded in me as a young endurance rider. Do you feel that to finish is to win is still applicable
Absolutely.
to the endurance in the 21st century?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to include everybody. I mean, I know that they have a lot more awards and things like that for the top finishers, but anybody, I mean, anybody that finishes at 4 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
or 5:15 in the morning, and that's a win.
Well, I mean, you're wearing your Tevis buckle this evening.
Yeah.
I have my Tevis
Right.
buckle on, and that's what we won. That was what we went for. Was we wanted that finish
recognized,
with that buckle.
Yeah, and another thing about when somebody, you got a buckle, they don't ask you what was your time,
What place you came in.
what place nobody, you got a buckle.
Right.
That's a winning situation.
Well, the buckle is the gold medal of endurance riding, as far as I'm concerned. The Tevis is where it all began. That's what started endurance riding. It's what kicked the whole idea off, and worldwide it is known as the greatest accomplishment in endurance riding. I mean, we have international riding now, and we have actual gold medals for individuals and team medals and all of that, but this is where it all began, and this ride is so difficult to finish. You have a 50-50 chance of making it into Auburn. So by those definitions, it is the most significant ride that I believe that you can do. So the buckle, to wear that buckle is a privilege. You can't buy it anywhere. You might inherit it if you're lucky, but to wear the one that you earned is very significant. It's a way of, kind of a stamp of approval that I made it. If I can survive the Tevis, then I can do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, my hat's off still to, I mean, I'm 70 years old now, so I have no interest in riding again. And to me, to want to ride it, it has to shimmy up from the bottoms of your feet all the way up to your hair follicles. That's how much you
I
want
think
to
I know
want
where
it.
your passion lies though now, and that is preserving the history and sharing it. And I think it's really important that our new riders, the people that come into this sport and then they set the Tevis ride as their bucket list. That's their goal.
Right.
And I think it's really important that they understand where our roots.
Right. Incidentally, in 1978, when I was talking to Wendell Roby, I said, Wendell, I think Auburn should be the endurance capital of the world.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, that's funny, because I had a bunch of friends that started a phenomenon called couch potatoes down in Pasadena, and we used to sit around and goof about capitals of the world. Who knew as many, and so I got to Auburn, I see this happening, the run and the ride. Well, this is the endurance capital of the world. Well, it took until 2001 for that to actually happen, thanks to Harvey Roper, and I was in the Tevis office, working in the Tevis office at the time, and he called and said, you ever heard of this? And I said, oh yeah, let's do it. And so we went to the city council, we made it happen. So I was a founding member of the Endurance Capital Committee, and we put on expos and parties and all sorts of things, had a great time. And then I had to go write a book, so I went away from that for a while. But now I'm back. I've started going to the Endurance Capital meetings again. So what does that mean? There's Shannon in there going, if we did that, it'll do this, and then we can do this, and it'll do that, and it'll do this, and it'll go whoosh,
And the goal is to get the community behind it.
Get Auburn rolling again, and and get the run, the ride, the other events.
Oh, we have
the run and the
mountain
ride.
biking,
Yeah.
the bicycle races.
There's an event almost every
Every
weekend.
weekend.
Sometimes I
Yeah.
drive through the confluence and I go, oh my God, where are all these
know.
people from?
I know.
Well, that's because Shannon was saying,
Yeah.
you gotta come and look at this.
You got to see our canyon.
You gotta see this, yeah. And so they did. So, okay, we got people outside now.
Yeah.
That's a good thing,
The Tevis compares to other rides because it involves planning. The trail is very difficult. It's very arduous. You have to think well ahead of time about Tevis. Other rides you could 6 weeks, 8 weeks before say, okay, I think I'm going to go do that 50 and get your horse in shape and go. And being a straight line race, you have to plan for crews. How are they going to drop you off and get your rig back to Auburn and and meet you at crew stops and all of the other things that are involved to cover that distance. And a lot of endurance rides are loops from the camp. They're fairly simple. You can go, show up Friday sometime, Friday afternoon, ride Saturday, leave Saturday night, Sunday morning, and you're all good to go. Tevis is, the whole week before is all about getting ready and making sure you have everything. It's about screaming at your spouse and yelling at your kids. It's about worrying if your horse is just right, and examining how much he slobbers in the bucket. Is that an indication there's something going wrong? I mean, it's something that it takes a hold of you, and it's not the same as a regular ride. I've done multi-day endurance rides before, and they are in a whole different category than the Tevis, and even going halfway across Nevada to do a multi-day endurance ride is less complicated, in my opinion, than riding the Tevis. Maybe because I hold it so highly that it's hard for me not to see it at a very high level.
Your feet. You are busy lady.
I tried,
and then I appreciate your enthusiasm and what you're trying to do in the sharing of the history. And I just really want to encourage you to keep writing.
Thank you.
To put this history on paper so it stays around for a long time.
I will.
So thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you, and it's good to see you.
Nice to see you, dear.